All right, so welcome everybody. My name is Matt Howard. I'm the moderator here. So we've got a hybrid session today with people here in the room. I'm Matt Howard, Norwest Venture Partners. We have Rachit, hoping I pronounced his name correctly, on Zoom, right? And we have Suresh and Prakash, also remote. So I thought I would, how much time do we have, just so I make sure? All right. So I just have a couple of opening remarks to make, and I think it's kind of interesting if you look at the IT world in general and just human beings. I think we're becoming more and more oversubscribed. We're constantly being asked to do more with less. And if you look at years ago, I think IT professionals had more time for beta testing and evaluating things. I think we're just so overconsumed and being asked to do more and more things. And we just don't have a lot of separation between work and off work. A lot of people don't really know this, but the US has the highest productivity in the world, from what I'm told. We're a very productive species and we work hard, especially in Silicon Valley. I'm told Silicon Valley has the highest productivity within the US. And, I think we as an industry, especially in Silicon Valley, I think we spend too much time working on fancy marketing gimmicks. And I think the most important thing is if we just deliver to the customer and our customers what we tell them, I think we'd make everything happy. And there's a thing called the 7-Eleven rule that one happy customer will bring you 7 new potential customers, and one unhappy customer will chase away 11. Because I think we tend to talk more about things that are they're complaining. People talk more about things that have complaints, and so for all of us, we also worry about all these marketing gimmicks. But we all work in this world of churn today. I don't care which industry we're in. It's all about we spend so much time acquiring a customer, maintaining a customer, and so we have to deliver great results to our customers. And so. I think the simple things really matter. And if you look at AI, ML, I think now we've gone to this world of what's practical. I think a few years ago, I think people had false illusions of the second coming of AI, ML. And as Elon Musk said, humans are underrated. And so I think we've gone into this realm of what is practical AI and what can we do with some realism in it. And so if you look at the early days, an example of cars, of an automatic transmission versus a manual transmission, we as a human being, we decided, when was the right time to shift gears and downshift. And now it's almost impossible to find a car with a manual transmission. And so if you think of that as the early days of autonomy, you look at an automatic transmission with some algorithms in there now. And now I think about 3 years ago was the first time that automatic transmissions gave better gas mileage than manual transmissions. And so even tractor trailers today, if you these big semis now are automatic transmissions. A friend of mine works for Prakash, I guess they make Kenworth and Peterbilt, and he said now they're all pretty much automatic transmissions. So I think what's happening now is we come to this this realm of collaborative autonomy, where autonomous engines partner with people. So I think on this panel we're going to talk about autonomy and really just what's practical here, and because we have to make constant adjustments if we want to maintain our customers. So I guess Suresh, it'd be great maybe to talk a little bit about your journey on autonomy and from your example at Palo Alto.
Thank you, Matt. And Matt, I think your comments really resonated with me because when Suresh kind of kicked it off, there was this dichotomy between taking a bunch of things and making them completely autonomous, so there was zero human intervention. And I was thinking to myself, Suresh, that, that is sort of an idealized end state, right? I mean, right now we run a mission critical service. So the service that I'm responsible for and my team is responsible for is really around delivering zero trust security to our customers. We've got thousands of customers. It's mission critical. If we go down, their sort of employees cannot log in and work, especially during the pandemic. This is very critical. So there's really no margin for error, right? Even a little bit of downtime and, the phone starts ringing and, things just blow up. So I think we're not by any means at a point where we can completely delegate to an autonomous system and not be involved and have no alerting mechanism, back into some humans who can actually take care of it. So clearly that was one thing. So when you were talking about sort of practical autonomy and being pragmatic in how we approach it, that's very much how we are looking at it. However, our end state is really what Suresh was describing, right? So take pieces of what we do and drive more and more autonomy into it. What we are trying to do is essentially take, for example, things like in our domain, security policies are big, right? So can we take the the analysis of security policies, which have to constantly change and adapt as the enterprise's needs change, and can we make that analysis automated so that it no longer requires human sort of review and checks and so on, and only in the event of some rules being at odds with the intent that we can infer in an automated way. When that disconnect happens, then an alert comes back to a user who's then able to do something about it. We are looking at, for example, getting a lot of telemetry from our systems and doing a lot more automated, root cause analysis. And then again, in most cases, be able to act on it and close the loop and make whatever config changes may be needed to keep moving. But there will always be a certain number of cases where there is an alert back into a human.
You're in the world of trust.
Yes.
False positives, false negatives, the ultimate tension. So when you went to your management, how did you sell them an autonomy? It must have raised some eyebrows.
Well, again, this goes back to, I think, what Manu was saying, right? We've got also an imperative to make sure that, we're improving margins and the business is actually getting healthier and healthier as we were going through the growth. So there was also this tension to reduce cost because getting this much sort of human engagement in the operations of the service, doesn't work from the point of view of cost. So I think it was an easy sell in that sense. But I think we also had to make sure that we are making the transition to autonomy, but doing it in a way that does not let the service down, but also drives down costs. So it's really, balancing the two requirements there.
Well, great. We'll be able to go around again. So Rachit, can you hear me okay? All right, so I'll throw out a question there. So Paylocity is a very innovative company. And by the way, just a little backdrop, we in this room right now are pretty much the R&D arm of corporate America. If you look at IBM Labs, HP Labs, Xerox PARC, they're all gone. So now we collectively are pushing the envelope and pretty much and working on these advanced technologies. And even InQtel, has a venture arm to work on these innovative technologies. So I was really intrigued at Paylocity. You have this phrase called "Think Next Generation." I'd be curious to see how you stumbled upon autonomy and how that fits with your concept of next generation services.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the way we think about the way we start with autonomy is we start with automation. There is a clear distinction between what automation is and where does it lead to, which is mostly autonomy. So we start with pieces with automation. Things like we process payroll for more than 30,000 businesses in the US. A payroll process is about 250 steps. Automating all of that requires us to trust the systems. The systems are doing the right thing. We don't want to give people the wrong paychecks. So that requires us to build resilient system that is monitored by a human. We eventually want to get to a state where all of this happens end to end in a real-time fashion, and we can mark paychecks, transactions as false positive, false negative to understand how the system is doing. Same thing is applicable to software development. It was years ago, someone shared that Copilot will become reality very soon. This is 2013, 2014, right? Back then, we were still focused on automating a lot of these mundane tasks. Mundane tasks like upgrading your libraries that requires no brain cycle or brain power. It's just going into files, upgrade, making changes, committing, testing. If it works, push it through. Building features and capabilities require you to think end-to-end test cases, end-to-end capabilities, and then translate them to code. That part, I doubt, will be autonomous anytime soon. Automation will play a very critical role, and this is where we want people at Paylocity to invest a lot of time in automating these pieces, so that way we're not spending time in manual, high toil tasks. We rely on machines to do these repeated tasks, and we get the people to focus on innovation, thinking about next gen, disrupting the market, so that way we can do more with what we have.
Maybe you could define for us some of the differences in your organization of autonomy versus automation.
Yeah. So automation is where a good example, a good analogy would be you're sitting in a car driving, and it's a manual car, right? You're moving your gears. And you translate that into a automated transmission car. That's automation. Human is still the driver. Human makes a decision on where to go, what to do. Remove human from that equation and let the car drive itself. That's autonomy. Same thing in software or the things that we do. If there is no human involvement, the process starts, learns, and executes on its own. And learning is a key part of it. Autonomous systems learn, automated systems don't.
Well, I'm sure. I'm sure when you went to management and you said, because your organization is also built on trust, how did you build the trust within your organization when you decided to move some of your workloads from automation to autonomy?
Yeah, it's never an easy conversation because as humans we like control. We want to be in charge. Letting a machine do things is not what makes us comfortable. So internally, what we did was we ran these autonomous systems in dry run mode. So they would run, make decisions, execute, won't impact production, but they would log everything. So we would, end of the month, we would tally these reports and see how the system's doing. Are they more efficient? Are they more performant? What we came to was we were spending, I think, 600 people hours every month in chewing up these reports with like with 4 nines of accuracy. Machines, on the other hand, were giving us 6 9 accuracy with zero human intervention. 6 months of dry run gave us enough confidence to take a step back and let it run on its own. But we still look at these records every month just to validate and make sure the system is not misbehaving. It's still on the right track. And that is how we justified the investments to begin with. And now we are running an autonomous system that tells us how things are doing. The benefit of that, now that those people who were doing manual work can now focus on building new capabilities for us that will help us delight our customers.
And Prakash, can you hear me okay? Okay. Yes. So again, thank you for everybody making time here. Again, everybody is very busy. So Prakash, your company is growing exponentially, really quickly. You're kind enough to share with us some of the growth here. I'm curious, what was life like before you started rolling out some autonomous capabilities? Maybe you could describe what your life was like growing, exponentially, and maybe you can contrast it, the before and after. And what did you do? It's kind of a multi-question here. What did you do with the resources that were freed up?
Yeah, so great point. So we are a rapidly growing SaaS platform. As you know, we build out hundreds of services that power commerce applications across many retailers. So we're an e-commerce, headless commerce solution. We saw this with larger companies who have done this in-house, and they bought in the efficiencies around automating them over a longer period of time. And this is their core competence. And whereas Amazon, Google, and others who are predominantly the leaders in cloud computing environment. And I think it took a while for them to get to that stage. So we saw these issues when we started rolling our first few customers. Very similar. I mean, if you take e-commerce in general, it's actually an aggregation of several services that come together. So they all have to work in unison. So not even one system, one failure of a microservice could actually bring the entire, will have some level of degradation. So I think we had our SRE team primarily focused on manually managing our operating environment, from whether it's auto scaling, warming up lambdas, auto sizing, resiliency, graceful degradation, like conceptually kind of automating a lot of this. So when we started looking at autonomy and different vendors, we start off with one account, our first customer. And when we saw a degradation in the checkout flow, we when we turned on autonomy, we actually spent some time to understand how this really works and warming up the landers in advance to handle the conversion. So there's a direct customer impact when you actually see this, and you can go back to your business and actually say, this is actually beneficial to us. And we have our SRE team focus more on our commerce applications rather than the operating environment. So I think that's how we saw the difference. Initially, they focused more on the operating environment. We rather want them to focus more on our core key applications and how they all connect together.
Well, thanks. And Suresh, a question for you. I mean, you've got a great background, Cisco and Palo Alto Networks. Now, two things. One, can you describe a little bit about some of the results that you're seeing? And then now that you're starting to see some results, are you holding the organization back, or is the organization holding you back for deploying more autonomy in your organization? So again, the results, and who's the bottleneck? Or is the organization a bottleneck, or are you the bottleneck?
I'd say, at this point, so we've seen some really good results now with what we've done. The bottleneck is, I think, the rate at which we can actually add more and more trusted autonomy into the operational paths, which is, in fact, that's the reason me and Suresh first connected, right? Because we were looking at what more we could do to accelerate our journey on that path. One of the challenges we have is, we still run VMs. So a lot of what is available in the industry, even with the work that Sedai is doing, is not immediately applicable to us. There's some serverless, which is where we are exploring some possibilities. However, it is very specific to our domain. Given, we're a security company, there's lots of security analysis that's happening in automated fashion, right? Alerts that come around, potential, threats being detected in traffic passing through the network. That all requires a level of, reaction that actually is constantly evolving, because the threats are never stable, right? You got new malware popping up all the time. So it's a fast moving landscape, and driving a lot of autonomy into that means really understanding the pieces of it that you can make autonomous and some parts of it that will necessarily be manually driven, right? And that's where maybe that split between what is it that you can safely, deliver to autonomous systems, which means you break the problem down into, a path that can be generalized and made common, that applies across multiple domains. It's not only relevant, by the way, for our operations, but like I said, when we are doing automated root cause analysis, it's about gathering diverse telemetry from assets that we produce. That's Palo Alto Networks with its firewalls and all the, assets we put in the cloud. But the next natural step for us is to maybe ingest IAM policies, maybe telemetry from some other vendors, and drive it through those same, engines. Because at the end of the day, we are responsible for the security outcomes for our customers. They look to, Palo Alto as the security partner, right? So in that sense, we've got to extend our visibility beyond our own assets to be able to drive that autonomy. So a long answer, but the answer to your question is, I think we're held back by our own ability to innovate on this front and drive more autonomy. There is really nothing organizationally stopping us from doing it, because it's very much aligned with, like I said, more reliable operations, because we always have the, the belts and suspenders of actual humans being able to deal with anomalous alerts or anything unusual that may be happening in the operations. So we've got that in place. So we're not going to let the actual outcome for the customer suffer, but we're constantly improving the efficiency with which we're able to drive the operations, which means better margins for the company.
And when you started to roll this out, did you create a certain amount of insecurity within the organization where people did they feel threatened, or did you have to take any steps to build a trust by the employees?
Yeah, actually, there are two ways in which it can disturb people, which is if there's an existing large service where you're driving autonomy, there's a class of people whose jobs is in some sense going to be, autonomous away, right? Some jobs get automated away. This is a little bit, beyond that. So there's a certain level of discomfort that might come from that group of employees. We were not in that position. We were growing so fast over the pandemic that our team was not large enough to deal with the work we had to do. So in some sense, autonomous came as sort of a knight in shining armor to help the people who were there, who were, getting woken up in the middle of the night and had just a bad work-life balance, regain control of their lives in some sense. So I think in that sense, it came as a positive thing. That was not an issue at all. I think, where it could be, like I said, could be an issue is where you're bringing it into a more legacy organization and possibly causing some human tasks to just go away. Our hope is, as we do this, we invest less in the operations part of the business, and we invest more in really innovating in whether it's the security side or on the access part of it, where we can make sure that in terms of better telemetry, better visibility into what's happening, and feed that back to our own customers so that they have confidence that the service is being delivered to to the SLAs that we've promised them.
Great. And Rachit, can you hear me okay? Just want to make sure.
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Good, thank you. So in your journey of autonomy, I'm just curious, there's always a push and pull in technology. Sometimes the CEO and other people might have false expectations on technology. I'm curious, in your organization, is it a pull or push? Are you pushing a rock up a hill, or are you trying to set realistic expectations? I'm just trying to better understand the type of pressure that you're under for autonomy.
Yeah, so what Suresh said resonated with me really well. Autonomous system cannot be a knee-jerk reaction of the organization. They need to be part of the strategic alignment with the business. What that means is there are a lot of good use cases which need to be explored, so that way we can invest in the right systems. At Paylocity, one of the things that we discovered over time was a lot of teams were spending times on tasks that they were not excited about. One of them was scaling the systems, right? Like, this adds no value to their ecosystem. So they were pushing for a solution. The solution initially was, let's hire associate software engineers, someone who recently graduated, give them this task because I don't want to do it. This does not excite me. So what helped us as an organization was laying out the pieces that no one wants to do. What tools can we bring in to automate those pieces? That way, they're driven by autonomous systems and we get the benefit of it. Benefit would be it frees up more time or activities that will add more and more value to the customers. So from that perspective, we have a very strong alignment, and that happened over time because adding in a new tool that replaces toil was part of a key strategic alignment versus a knee-jerk reaction to something happening extraneous in our extraneous environment.
And Rachit, as an early adopter, I'm curious, how do you create an environment where you're keeping an alertness? And for example, the other day, my pilot went out on my hot water heater, and I didn't really remember how to light it. And so I'm just wondering, as you start outsourcing, if you will, part of the boring things, the basic things, the things that we, that autonomy can address, how do you keep a level of vigilance in your organization so you know how to go back and create, retain the know-how to light the pilot light again?
Yeah. So I spent 2.5 years at Netflix. One thing that I learned over there was watch your metrics like a hawk. And that is what we do, right? So as a leader, I'm responsible for product, engineering, IT, and design. All of these departments have 4 to 5 key metrics that we review on bi-weekly basis. So like IT is part of the system. So they look at availability, reliability, error rate, P95s or 95th percentile of the performance. If they start to go south, we get worried, and we have SLOs built in. So anytime something goes wrong, we know that the system is unhealthy. Are the autonomous system working for us? If they go red, then something is wrong. It's not. And that is when it gets escalated to humans, which is put on your thinking hat, figure out what the problem is, because an autonomous system was not able to. So doubling down on what your key indicators of success are, looking at them on a regular basis, and then holding teams accountable for certain outcomes, which could be driven by SLAs, SLOs.
Great. And Prakash, just to make sure you can hear me okay. Okay. So Prakash, in a startup, as you know, every day you're fighting for your survival. And with your exponential growth, mistakes can be magnified. So when you started rolling out, Sedai at a very aggressive manner, how did you do so without creating any harm in the organization. What steps did you take to make sure that no harm was created?
Yeah, so we had playbooks earlier to that where it's more manual processes, but these are well-defined playbooks on how we recover and restore our operations. So what Sedai really helped us is automating some of the mundane tasks around the compute, auto sizing, and everything else. But the playbooks still remain. What was important to us was it's a hybrid model where you have autonomy working closely, but then when there is something that autonomy cannot handle, you do have a handoff that is clear as a human hands off to another handoff. The handoff determines what the manual action needs to be there on with the right set of data, monitoring, and everything else. So it's a seamless transaction between the two. So as we're sizing this operating environment, we started looking at one customer at a time and also one function at a time, where we get really familiar with the function and the handoff process, and then use that to scale it organically after that.
Great. And did you have any organ rejection by the people within the IT organization? Did you have to take any steps to build trust within your organization by the SRE engineers and other people?
No, similar to what Rachit said and Suresh said as well. It is something that people don't want to do over a longer period of time. I think the initial function seems to be oriented more around your operating environment, and slowly it becomes more functional and application oriented. And we want our engineers to be more in that space. And I think the transition was seamless so that they have a better job to kind of focus more on the application rather than doing the automated tasks by themselves. So that's how we slowly transitioned. And it was seamless. I think they understood it, and it was a lot easier for us on the longer run.
Great. And how are we doing on time? Just want to make sure. Okay, I just maybe, Suresh, do you have any other thoughts? Maybe you can talk a little bit about your roadmap and what are the next big things you want to do in autonomy?
Actually, before I go there, Matt, I think you asked a question which sort of I thought was an important one, which is as we, sort of delegate some of these core things to other sort of like Sedai, let's say, how do we make sure that we're not, losing some part of our core competence that's required for us to innovate the service? So like you said, as in the roadmap, some parts of what we do are going to be so critical that we want to keep in-house because we want to keep building on it rather than rely necessarily on a third party to do it. So I think that distinction is an important one. So, you always want to be able to go and light your pilot lamp, when the need arises. So there's a bit of tension there, even in our thinking about how much we can outsource versus how much we want to keep inside. So I think you need to have a really good idea of what's core to the value you bring as a company for your customers and what's sort of complementing what you do, right? And it's external to that core that you can possibly outsource. So I think that's sort of a shifting boundary as the product itself evolves. As far as the roadmap is concerned, I think for us to in some sense know the difference between the two, so that we are not spending a lot of our own energy on things that folks like Sedai can do much better than us, right? Because that is not really, we're a company that delivers security and trusted zero trust access. So if what we are doing in the operational part is not aligned to that end goal, then we really don't want it to be on our roadmap, right? Because it's going to be solved better with by partnering with other companies. In the roadmap, I'd say for us it's going to be around as we see some fairly, non-linear growth in a positive sense, with our customers. We want to make sure our operational team is actually either staying flat or hopefully with more and more autonomy actually being driven down. So it's going to be all about, gathering more telemetry, building better monitoring, better alerting, and delegating more and more of, the operational parts of our service to autonomous systems.
And Rachit, last question for you is, now that we're in an economic slowdown, CFOs are questioning everything. So what is the ROI what is your justification case? And maybe you can talk a little bit about your spreadsheet as you justify incremental purchases around autonomy, and maybe you can share some of your thoughts.
Yeah, so the biggest expense that we incur as a company is around the engineering cost, right? We hire engineers at a really good price point, and they are given the best work, which is innovate, do more. So it's usually a very easy conversation because productivity is top of mind for everyone. If I go and tell them this tool helps us recoup 1 to 5% of our engineering time, they get excited about it. What I lose is additional headcount, but I would rather have more effective, efficient people rather than more people. So that works out in our favor. It's all about creating that business use case. And before you move on, so the one thing that Suresh mentioned, I don't know if I align to that, the pilot example. The world that we are marching towards, these tasks are eventually going away. A good example of that was OS optimization. Operating system optimization was a thing in 2000, 2005, 2010. And now it's actually an anti-pattern to log into a system and make changes. Everyone says, please don't do it. It's GitOps, right? All your changes need to sit in Git. So mastering OS over OS is not a thing anymore. It's the same thing with Pilot. If that thing is automated, your system won't be using Pilot lights anymore. That would be automated. It will be done as part of the whole package. So you hit a button, it will be made seamless and easy. So there would be a transition to the things that we actually don't care about. These would be visceral skills, would eventually will go away. And this is part of the journey that we need to take the orgs along as we introduce more and more of these tools. Like what are the skills that you care about? What are the skills that you don't care about? Eliminate them from your system slowly. So that way you can fully embrace the new world, which is more autonomous, more automated, and can scale well.
And Prakash, last question for you. You know, they say the difference between a fool and a wise man, a fool learns from their own mistakes, a wise man learns from somebody else's. You have a very large Sedai deployment. I guess if you could wave your magic wand, what things would you do differently on the deployment, and what advice can you give the people here, in this conference as they look forward towards autonomy? What would you do differently?
Yeah, I think we started off kind of automating some of our build and deployment environment initially before Sedai, and primarily started off mostly around the runtime and the auto staging, auto scaling environment. I would say that over time, when you look at stateless machines and what we're working on, our services are independent of each other and modular. So and we thrive on configurability and extensibility. And it's important to kind of understand there's a lot of dependence on our services on third-party vendors that we bring to the ecosystem. We're not building everything. Our secret sauce is our core capabilities, but we also have commoditized software that integrates with us, like tax and address verification, payments, and others. We can't define their operability and their operations environment. So it'd be helpful to kind of understand how all of this kind of work in unison when you have a large ecosystem of partners coming into your world. How do you bring that in is equally important. So having that automated tuning of all your third-party vendors that work in unison with your application is critical for the customer success, which is critical to our success as well.
Well, great. I think we're out of time. We went a little bit longer. So thank you. Everybody was very engaging, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt, for some good questions.